Hi there, I'd just like to take a few moments to talk about the film A Night to Remember. Now, obviously I am going to completely ignore the horrible, hideous abomination that is known as Titanic, the James Cameron version. There's no Celine Dion in this, no Leonardo DiCaprio and no Kate Winslet or Billy Zane running around acting like some retarded plum. This is the real deal. This film came out in 1958. Now, they made this film purely on the basis of what survivors had said. So they hadn't actually found the sunk Titanic, so this has purely gone on merit of what people had said, eyewitness accounts, and general information that was around at that time. So if there was anything that was not 100%, you can understand. I mean, we have Bob Ballard to thank to know where the Titanic is now. Now, as we know, the ship sank, hit an iceberg in the North Atlantic with a loss of 1,500 passengers and crew. So, as we know, it was an absolute disaster, the ship, one of the biggest in maritime history and the end of the industrial age as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, let's get back to the film. This stars some probably actors you haven't heard of. Kenneth Moore here plays Second Officer Lightoller. He was held by some of the crew and passengers as a hero. And here we have Bruce Ismay talking to Thomas Andrews. Thomas Andrews was the designer, and this is Bruce Ismay, the president of the White Star Line. They're chatting around the speed. You see, a lot of what goes on in this film is possibly what did go on at the time. Now, the other film doesn't really focus on the characters around Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet's character. It focuses primarily on them, so most of the people are just background. But in this film, they're foreground. They're the main centre of the film. So the whole film pans around all the different individual and characters. We see Captain Smith behind him there, and they're just chatting around about the speed of the ship and all of the little idiosyncrasies and stuff that have been written into various books, as well as the one which this is followed on, A Night to Remember, are all in this. Now, take into consideration the effects are not going to be like the James Cameron one, but that's obvious as it's a model. And what I will say, to give you some idea of the actual size of this model, I'll give you a comparison. That's one big model. You don't get many of them out of a model kit box there. Need a lot of super glue with that one. Right, so most of this film is the sinking of the ship. The first 20 minutes is just getting to relay that the ship's large, it's been built, and it's putting the characters together on the ship for all the elements of what is about to become known as A Night to Remember. And as we know, that's one of the wireless operators who, there was two of them and they both stayed at their post until the ship sank. I mean, a lot of this script James Cameron ripped off with his film. I mean, he might as well have just flipping copied it. It really pisses me off when I watch that film, I'm sorry. But the script's primarily just ripped off. God, that guy is so unoriginal sometimes. Anyway, here we get Captain Smith with the higher ranking officers telling them that the ship is going to sink. There's not enough lifeboats, and to put the women and children on first, which is a very archaic form. Nowadays, I think it's families first, thank goodness for that. But in them days, it was women and children. And may I also bear in mind, it was first class women and children, then second class, and then we don't really give a shit about the rest. So you can appreciate all the panic that would have ensued, primarily on the basis of that. And most of the first class passengers didn't believe the thing was sinking anyway. And most of them refused it. This is supposed to be Molly Brown, the unsinkable Molly Brown, and unlike the James Cameron one, she's not here for comic relief. Thank God for that. And also to bear in mind that none of that was focused on the James Cameron one is the people who kept the lights working, the electricians, I suppose you'd call them, or the people who run the electrics on board the ship. They kept the lights on that ship running to avoid as much confusion as possible, right down till it began to go underneath the water, and they only had literally minutes to get out before they all died. And if I think I recall, they did all die. Yeah, not a bad shot of the model. Anyway, I suppose this is where things start to break down. The first class passengers, the women and the children, really don't want to be separated from their husbands, because that will inevitably be the end of the family. They know the husbands have got no place on the lifeboats. No matter what the husbands say, they're not stupid. And we go now to the musicians who played right down to the end. apparently they thought that a little bit of music would keep their spirits up. Well, there's no harm in trying, as they say, is there? But when you're faced with inevitable doom, I don't suppose it makes a lot of difference, does it? And this is true as well. One of the bakers, or chefs I think it was, got himself absolutely paralytic, then jumped off the ship right at the end when the stern went into the water, and he didn't even get his head wet. Good idea, my friend. As we can see here, the musicians playing to the last as the ship now begins to take its final plunge. Now, this is more dramatic, I feel, in this film than the James Cameron, despite all the flash CGI effects and running around with Billy Zane and his counterpart there, his evil henchman, David Warner, who I think really should have thought twice about playing that part. Mind you, he probably raked in a lot of money doing it, so look, in all fairness, if you'd given me the offer, I might well have done it too. But it's not going to happen. So here we come to see the ship finally at its end. Now you can see the panic ensued in this. None of this is really portrayed in the other film, but this is what I think makes this film really stand alone. You can appreciate, obviously, the budget was smaller, the effects are smaller, and in all manner of terms, this is a smaller film. But what it portrays is something quite special, and I think it'll put it back for the time, because it was nearer. I mean, the people, when they made this film, were actually survivors of the original Titanic. So they watched it, and when they were on the set, they said, this portrays everything that I witnessed when I was watching what was going on, and when I was a survivor on a lifeboat. I mean, what more do you want? Actual survivors commenting, and even second officer Lightoller commented on it. He witnessed this and gave him some information on how to direct it. I mean, come on. What more do you want from a film? How much more accurate do you want it to get? But never mind, as you can see, the band here playing the ship off as it begins to descend. It's quite sad, really, considering that they all died. But yet again, in the later CGI colour film, nobody apparently gives a damn about them. All aside, I think this is a great account of probably what went on. I think it's a lot more faithful to what probably people experienced and went through than the James Cameron Hollywood style. I'm sorry to keep going on about it, but it really ticks me off because I've done a lot of research on the Titanic, and personally speaking, I'm a big fan of the ship, and not a fan of what happened, obviously, but the aura and the suspense and the mystique and the mystery that surrounds the ship still fascinates me, and I'm not on my own with that one. I mean, I don't think the legend or the legacy of the Titanic will ever die. It's just one of those enduring things through life. It's sad, it's depressing, but it also goes to show the best of man and woman as when they struggled against things which obviously you're not going to beat. Honestly, I think this film passes the James Cameron one by miles, and I think anybody who hasn't seen it should go out and rent it now.
Those who desire now to offer up their praises and thanksgiving for thy